Let's talk more about the impact of that extraordinary decision from the Prime Minister. Long floated, was in their manifesto. I'm not denying any of that, but to basically recognise a Palestinian state, which has been regarded as quite clearly a victory and a reward for Hamas. We know that because they said it themselves. Well, let's talk about this with Eitan Fischberger. He's a writer and also an investigator with open source intelligence and a former IDF staff sergeant who joins us now. Good morning to you, Eitan.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've been following you on social media for quite some time. You're one of the many people trying to debunk a lot of the lies that we are told about what is going on in Gaza. And it's very much what's going on in Gaza and the claims of genocide that we are hearing that are seeming to be used to justify the decision by the British Prime Minister to recognise a Palestinian state. Is that a reasonable, fair and objectively true claim?
Yeah, I would say for sure. I think you can draw a clear line between the quote-unquote genocide accusation with the quote-unquote recognition of a quote-unquote Palestinian state. You know, me and a few other investigators have been tracking the genocide narrative since October 8th, 2023. So not even 24 hours after the horrible Hamas-led October 7th massacre, you already had Palestinian organizations, anti-Israel organizations, politicians saying, oh, you know, Israel's preparing for a genocide. So they're already planting the seeds, you know, way before Israel even entered Gaza.
Yeah. There was a UN motion, I think, within 48 hours condemning the attack by Israel on Gaza within 24 hours of October. Yeah.
Exactly, and you know, and not just the UN. I mean, obviously the UN, but so many other countries. Qatar had a statement, you know, condemning Israel on October 7th. China had a statement condemning Israel on October 7th. And you know, there's this thing called the illusory truth effect, which is just a fancy way of saying that if you repeat a lie enough, it becomes the truth. Yeah. So I think, you know, there are probably multiple reasons that Keir Starmer decided to recognize a Palestinian state. But that's definitely one of the reasons, is just this constant repetition of the lie.
Well, I mean, Keir Starmer's been branded a modern-day appeaser. We know that the Hamas leadership have made it very clear. They've talked about, you know, this being a reward, this justifying what they did on October the 7th. They've called it a victory for them. Is it?
I think quite clearly it is. I mean, you know, they're handing out streets in Gaza. You have, you know, I follow all the Palestinian and Hamas affiliated Telegram channels and social media accounts, and they are over the moon. And, you know, the thing that Keir Starmer doesn't understand is that, you know, this isn't going to score him any real political points. I know that the vast majority of the British public, you know, opposes this move. But, you know, back to your point, I think that what's really sort of amazing in a kind of ghoulish way is that you can really, you know, you really see the line, you see the thorough line. You know, this recognition, a British recognition of a Palestinian state, was not on the table on October 6th, 2023. In other words, it would not have happened if it wasn't for the Hamas-led October 7th massacre. So, you know, you can say, oh, this move is meant to, it's not a reward for Hamas. But like, those are just words. Just because you say it's not a reward for Hamas, exactly.
Yeah, and if they think it is, then it is. And so what lessons are being learned? Because you say you follow all of these, I mean, really quite horrific Telegram accounts. These are the ones that happily live streamed the massacres, the brutal, beheadings and burnings and rapes and the horrific treatment of people in Israel on October the 7th, and indeed the taking of the hostages. I mean, we know a lot of stuff happened because Hamas filmed it, despite many people still denying that a lot of this stuff happened. But there's also been a clip, and I saw you put this out yesterday, of Hamas carrying out summary executions. And I've got to we can't play, for obvious reasons in the Western media, the full video, but I've tweeted it out because I think people shouldn't look away. 3 men kneeling down, blindfolded. They're accused, I think, of being collaborators with Israel. Who knows what their actual crime was. Big crowds, children in the crowd, and Hamas operatives, you know, quite clearly shoot them in the back, continue to shoot their bodies and execute them, and then everyone cheers and spits on their bodies. This is justice, Hamas Palestinian state style.
Yeah, I mean, this is you know, what was most traumatizing for me from this video, apart from the horrific scenes itself, was the cheering of the audience. And you know, Hamas still maintains popularity in the West Bank and in Gaza, and I guarantee you, you know, everyone mark my words now, in a few months when we get the updated, Palestinian Bureau of Statistics poll about Hamas's approval ratings, I guarantee you there will be an increase from yesterday in 3 months from now because they got what they wanted, right? So of course people
They've
are going to be
delivered.
cheering for
They've
them.
delivered. Fatah
Yeah.
and the Palestinian Authority haven't got this recognition from, I mean, crucial members of the United Nations Security Council. That's the key bit, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and thank God, we have people, in the media like you and people in the US and Israel and the British public, of course. I heard some of your calls earlier that are willing to stand up and speak truth to power and say this is not acceptable. This is not how we do things here in the West. This is not how we do things here in the UK. And the UN Security Council can say what it wants to say. The UNGA can say what it wants to say. But like I said before, just because you say things and put words on paper doesn't make it
Well,
reality.
this is it. This won't create a Palestinian state. There is no agreed border. That's something that the Palestinian leadership have repeatedly refused to agree to when offered Palestinian states by the United Nations, by every other body, by agreed to by Israel on 4 separate occasions. There is no agreed leadership, but very likely that the leadership reason why there's not elections in the West Bank for 20 years, same as in Gaza, is because we know who's going to get elected there. It would be Hamas. We don't know any of those things, but we also have a situation where the leadership of both current leaderships of those separate strips of land are committed to the destruction of Israel. What do you think happens next?
So first of all, I'm happy that you addressed, just to sidetrack one moment, I'm happy that you addressed the fact that the Palestinian Authority is, more moderate than Hamas, but
I
that's
mean,
first of all a very low bar. But they're paying the salaries for terrorists who kill Jews and Israelis and their families. So,
and that's
moderate.
not that there's literally a ministry that does that. It's not
Yes,
hidden.
there
They're open about
there
it.
absolutely is. But in terms of what happens now, it's sort of hard to say because it's sort of unclear how far Keir Starmer and Macron are going to take this illusion, this Palestinian state that they invented out of thin air. Theoretically, there's a possibility that this could open up the potentiality for Palestinians to buy arms from countries. Right now, they're like a legitimate state, quote unquote, and so they can buy arms and armaments. If they somehow manage to control their borders or get borders, then they can theoretically import thousands upon thousands of jihadists from all around Africa and the Middle East. It's really, really hard to say what's going to happen. But I guess we'll see in the coming weeks and months.
Well, as someone who's served in the IDF, you'll know far better than many what war is like. I have no experience of this. I was in Israel very recently. I was within a kilometre of the border with Gaza. You could hear and see missile attacks and shell attacks. Asking our own armed guard what weapon would be used then, who would be firing that, and it's very scary, and that's just from someone standing somewhere safe watching it. How accurate is the picture that we are seeing of what's on the ground in Gaza in the West? You say you follow all these Palestinian channels on Telegram and the like. How accurate is the picture that we're seeing?
It is almost completely inaccurate. It's so inaccurate that it's almost the inverse of reality. I mean, you have the IDF going door to door, meticulously taking out terrorist infrastructure and taking out terrorists, putting themselves on the line. It would be so much easier for the IDF to just decimate Hamas, but there would be a lot more civilian casualties. And so Israel, and I know soldiers, I know IDF soldiers, veterans, who have been injured and worse because of the meticulous, extremely careful way that Israel is fighting. But before I mentioned the propaganda and the illusory truth effect, and repeat a lie enough it becomes the truth. So, Palestinian media is not free. It's not like Talk TV. It's not like you, Julia. It's all dictated by Hamas and by the other terrorist organizations. They have very clear instructions of what you can and can't cover. Things are set up in advance to look like Israel did something terrible when in fact it's, again, completely fabricated. I myself and researchers far more talented than me have uncovered with proof, irrefutable evidence, the fact that there are journalists, dozens, if not hundreds of journalists in the Gaza Strip that are actually members of terror groups. I'm talking proof of them I mean, of course, cheering on October 7th and saying, we love Hamas,
On
we
their
love
public
Hamas, and you
social
are.
media accounts
Yeah,
often.
but I'm
Yeah.
saying in uniform. They're literally in uniform,
Some were
with
even in Israel on October the 7th. Yeah.
exactly. So, I would be very hesitant, and I would advise your audience to be very hesitant
But
to believe
But
what
here's
you're
the
seeing
thing.
in
So it's
Gaza.
one thing the British public, and I say to people, I say, if you're on the wrong side of this debate, my guess is you've just been watching or listening to the BBC too much, and you're seeing social media, which is absolutely pushing this agenda. But you know what, our Prime Minister, our Foreign Secretary, our Deputy Prime Minister, who was Foreign Secretary, you'd like to think, that they must know better than this. They must have advisors in their foreign affairs. They must have military advice about what is really going on. They must understand that the as far as we know on the death figures we have seen, that the ratio of combatant to non-combatant deaths is for want of a better word, the best it's ever been. We've never achieved in British fighting history such a low proportion of civilian deaths. Every death is a tragedy, I accept that, but nevertheless, a low proportion of civilian deaths compared to any war we've fought. Why do they not tell us the truth?
It's really hard to impugn a motive there. I would like to think that they're not so cynical that they would just do it to score political points with their base or whoever they think that their base is, or to please whatever allies in the Middle East they have. I know that
There's no
Starmer's supposed
votes
to.
in facts, is what you're saying.
Maybe, yeah, that's a good one. But listen, I know politicians are cynical, but I'm struggling, genuinely struggling to find any sort of justification for why they would do something like this. And again, especially now, especially so coordinated with so many other states, it almost feels like some sort of, it feels like it's been planned for months and years in the making. Now they're just deciding to unleash it now, just 2 weeks before the anniversary of October 7th.
Absolutely. Really good to speak to you. I hope you'll come back on the show. Eitan Fischberger, who's a writer, open source intelligence investigator, former IDF Staff Sergeant too. Thank you so much for that.